Hi all, this is the MakeHaven badging video for our Powermatic drum sander. It's called the Powermatic 2244 because it's 22 inches wide, but it has an open end on this side, which means you could have something 44 inches wide, pass it through once, turn it around and pass it through the other way and get actually 44 inches of coverage. So that's pretty cool. That's obviously much more than our planer. It doesn't have quite the same functionality as a planer. The planer will take off large amounts of material. The drum sander can remove a bunch, but probably not quite as aggressively. Also, well, they're just different. So the planer has sharp blades and this has sandpaper. So we'll look on the inside of it to get a sense of how it works. So there's this big roll of sandpaper and it's going to be spinning this way towards you. And then underneath is this conveyor belt. The conveyor belt is conveying your material forwards. So it's getting pulled forwards while this is sanding, and then this whole piece comes up and down. So you just want to be sanding off the top of your material. And then obviously dust collection from the top. And then once we turn it on, we can see some of the cool things it shows us. So I think this is blinking because the E-stop is pressed. Nope, it's just blinking because it wants to. So it turns out that this was blinking because it was turned off by pushing the switch off, and this conveyor was still on. So when we turn it on, it says, nope, we don't want to just start this moving. You need to turn this to the off position first. So now it should be happy. So we can turn this on, and you can see the conveyor moving. And then if we push this green start button, then the drum head will start spinning. We won't do that quite yet. So we can raise this guy up and down, and we're going to touch off our material. I got this nice piece of walnut I've been holding on to for a while, and I probably should run it over the jointer first to get a flat bottom, but we're just going to see what it looks like when we run it underneath here. So in terms of safety, this is a relatively safe tool. Just make sure not to stick any hands or body parts under there, no hair or anything sort of getting underneath there. And if anything does happen, obviously just hit the E-stop. In terms of how you feed the material through, if everyone feeds the material right through the middle, we're going to wear out the sandpaper right in the middle really quickly. So it's important to put things through at an angle so you hit all of the sandpaper that you can. You also want to make sure that everything's tracking nicely. So if you see the conveyor sliding to one side or the other, or anything is sort of tracking poorly, or it's not level, then just refer to the manual, which is inside the cabinet, and we'll get that straightened out. This has a pretty cool feature called a load meter. It calls it feed logic. And what that means is if it feels that it's being pushed too hard, so it's either moving too fast, or it's set too low, so it's removing too much wood, it'll automatically slow itself down, or as the sandpaper gets dull. So it's just sort of feeling how much work the motor is doing, and if it feels that it's doing a lot of work, it'll slow the conveyor down so that it isn't overburdening itself. So that's a kind of cool feature. To get the height, I'm just gonna spin this by hand and lower this until it just touches, just like that, and then raise it up a little bit. So now it's not touching and we should be good to go. And all right, so then I'm gonna close this, I'm gonna turn the dust collection on, and we can run it through at an angle. Look back, and it looks like, there we go. So gonna turn first the head on and the dust collection, and then gonna turn our conveyor on. And we're gonna start with a nice slow speed at an angle. So it's not really doing much in the middle. It seems like there's a little high point at the end, and now it's just kind of going along. But we'll let it go over the whole thing and then bring it down a little bit. We can see here that it's not really doing much work. Something else is that this is our first pass. So what we could do is zero this here. And so now as we lower it, we can see how much we're taking off. Or we could start before we put the wood through by lowering the head down to the conveyor and zeroing it there so we can tell it how thick we want our piece of wood to be at the end. So you can tell that it's slowed down a bunch because it can detect that it's taking a lot of power to do this. So I'm just going to raise this up a little bit to help it come through a little more easily. Wow. All right, so you can see that the board got significantly thicker right at the end, and so we had to keep raising it up so that it could sand it. But that's the general idea. In general, when you're sanding, so you do your first layer, and then you bring it down just by little increments. So you lower it, and you get a feel based on your speed, based on the type of wood, based on how wide the piece of wood is. All those factors will determine how much wood you can take off in each pass. And again, this is not a planer, this is for sanding. So you might use it to take off a bunch of wood if you're using a really heavy grit, like 36, 60, something like that. But then you can also go up to really fine grit and do finish work on it. So with that, we'll look at how to change the grits. I'm going to turn this off. And then just as I touched on this before, but if you wanted to zero it, you could lower it down. And so again, you just spin it as you're lowering it. And then going down. And you can just hear it touch. And that's when you would zero it. And now you know that it's at the height of your piece of wood. So now you say, I want my piece of wood to be ½ an inch thick. And it is now ½ an inch plus or minus thick. So that's the idea there. So now we're going to raise this up, and I'll show you how to take the paper off and on. Something else you can do is grab a block of hardened silicone, like this, or this might even just be a block of rubber. And we're going to turn it on just to clean the sandpaper. So you go like that, and that just helps clean the sawdust out of the sandpaper. So that's a good thing to do periodically, as well as vacuum out the conveyor belt so it doesn't get gummed up with sawdust. So I'll let that come to a stop. And so because you can really plow through the sandpaper on this, and it's pretty expensive, the way the sandpaper works for this is we have it available in the store in the back, and you can go and buy what we have available there. You could buy it on your own. And then let's say you want to keep that piece when you're done, then you can feel free to take that piece of sandpaper with you, or you can leave it on the machine, or you can store it under here in this cabinet. I'll show you how to open this. So this little lever lifts up and then twists. And so then you can put extra sandpaper in there, and then someone else can be like, oh, perfect, I wanted a 120 grit piece of sandpaper, and it can be available for them. And then obviously, if a piece of sandpaper is toast, then please just throw it out so no one else has to find that out the hard way. So now we're going to look at taking this paper off and on again. So the way it works is it just wraps around. It's not glued on. It just is held on by these clips. So we'll undo that. And the way I'm doing this is just by pushing. So this is a clip on a spring, so it applies tension to the strip. So if you push it forward, it opens up the clip, and then you can slide the sandpaper in. So we're just going to pull this off. And same deal here. We just pinch that clip and it comes right out. Then we're going to put it back in. So when we're putting it in, we're going to pinch the clip and then slide it in until the width of the sandpaper is right at that notch. And as you can tell, this is pretty specially cut sandpaper, and we're putting this beveled, angled side on the outside. So the angled side is going here, and then we're rolling inwards. And we're pushing it away. So I put it into the same depth as that mark, and then just getting it lined up with the edge. That doesn't need to be totally perfect. What you do want to make sure of is that as you're wrapping it, you're not overlapping with your previous piece, because then it would make a little lump and it would make lines in your workpiece as you're sanding. So we're just going to wrap this, and we'll get it close, but not overlapping. And there can even be a little gap, because it's a spiral, so it's not going to show up in your workpiece. Just going around, and if you want to buy these for yourself, they're just called, you can search for 2244 drum sander pre-cut sandpaper. I'm just wrapping this all the way around. And the load meter is pretty great because it'll help prevent people from accidentally hurting the machine by overloading it by using bad sandpaper or trying to take off too much. So I'm just going to slide these down because we're a little bit too far out. Okay, a little bit more. All right, so then we're just going to push this clip forwards and slide the sandpaper in. Just like that, and then we're going to let go, and it should pull tension on that sandpaper. So that should be, that was a little overlap, so we're going to do that again. There we go. Cool. So that should be good to go. So that's how you unwrap and wrap the sandpaper. Obviously, just close this guy and tighten it. And that is how you use the Powermatic drum sander. Thanks for watching.